I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome back. This is Hollywood Matrix, and today we're going to cover the movie Civil War from 2024, and this is the official Decode. And some of you might be wondering, why am I covering this movie? Well, we can go back any decade and find something to decode. So this one was interesting to me because it has a lot of ramifications to what happened before the election of 2024 and some of the assumptions by certain parties of what could happen. And so with this decode, you're going to see some of what I'm talking about here. And so again, this is Civil War 2024 Decode. And don't forget to check out don'tletthemburn.com and follow me on social media. We'll get to that, some of that in a second. And in fact, here we go. You can follow me on YouTube, obviously, here, and Rumble, and also Telegram. Telegram is where I share a lot of news articles and also resources, and I'll be getting more active on there with the videos very, very soon. So also you can follow me on X, and I know some of the audience is split from Telegram to X and, you know, other channels and whatnot. But all these channels will be getting all the videos. And so you stay tuned where you can stay tuned. Now, Civil War 2024. And so this movie, Civil War, was planned for the release of 2024, obviously, right? The theatrical trailer fueled ideas about a divided nation and a road to a real civil war. People might have been thinking, of all times in American history, why would Hollywood deploy such a film in an election year, right? And I don't blame them. Even I had the feeling that this was predictive programming, but I didn't watch the movie right away, right? Even I had the feeling. So in hindsight, people who want to control our country with ill intent always set political fires in an election year to dull the senses of the people and create confusion. So Civil War, directed and written by Alex Garland, opens with the scene of a president giving a State of the Union address. And here it goes. It says, "We are now closer than we have ever been to victory," right? And it says, "We are now closer than ever to a historic victory." And, you know, this sounds like somebody we all know, right? But I'll give more proof of that later on as we go here. So the country is already in turmoil. And Texas and California are the Western forces. Florida Alliance unites with most of the southern states. And last, there's the New People's Army Alliance, which includes most of the northern states. Got that? These forces are fighting the U.S. military after the secession. The rest of the country are loyalists to the supposed tyrannical president, right? And so the press in New York is chronicling the civil unrest where we meet Lee Smith, a female war journalist disillusioned with her career after seeing too much, and another young lady named Jessie, an aspiring photojournalist, and her idol is actually Lee Smith here, right? And we find out more about that later. And so there's a terrible bombing where an explosion occurred from a suicide bomber killing a group of bystanders. Nothing much is said about why this happened, but it's just showing you some of the chaos going on in the country because of this whole civil unrest, right? So here's another slide of what happened there in the film. Sorry for the gruesome photo here, but I had to show it. So there goes the young lady Jessie again, and then Lee is being helped by one of her friends. We'll get to that guy in a second. And so later, this is where we meet Joel and Sammy officially. They're getting ready for a trip to Washington, D.C. to interview the president, also where they'll be seen as enemy combatants, right? So they say, the word you're getting, we're going to D.C., Sammy. And Sammy is the guy there right next to Lee. And so photograph and interview the president. They literally see us as enemy combatants, right? So this is a whole conversation going on here. And the Heartland Maoists, it's all the same. So they're comparing the Western forces. Where is this? Oh, sorry. The Western forces here with Maoists, right? And for those that don't know, that's going back to Chairman Mao, the dictator from China, okay? So Western forces and, says it again, that they're all the same. And DC is falling and the president is dead inside the... And so he says, so you're going to go west, maybe as far as Pittsburgh, right? And he says the circle in west from then circle in from West Virginia. And so later we see Jesse here kind of try to meet Lee and talk to her about whatever, and he says, I didn't mean to like stalk you, but I want to say thanks. And she says, oh no, it's okay, keep it. And she was trying to give her sweat jacket or something back. So I'm a photographer and I want to be a war photographer actually. By the way, you have the same name as my hero. She was one of the first photojournalists. And she says, yeah, I know who Lee Miller is. And so we stop there. And so later we're going to see accounts of people being set on fire and more unrest from the recollection of Lee's viewpoint. And here it is. This is her memories going back to whenever this was. And this is Lee again, for those that forgot. So this guy's being set on fire here. Again, sorry for the gruesomeness, but this is the movie, right? And so she's recollecting all of this stuff. And so the next morning, Lee finds out that Jesse became a part of the crew by proxy. She then declares that Jesse only goes with them to Charlottesville. And so it was her friend, what's his name again? Joel, who actually invited her to go on the whole mission here. All right, so she's walking out kind of in shock that she sees the young lady there. So it says, right, and they go to the back of the truck and say, so right, so she can come over to the table. She came over to the table last night, and so she's coming with us. That's what she's asking here. And he says, you think he's going to do well running for cover with bullets flying over his head? I think right here it's talking about Sammy. I didn't take all the screenshots. It'll take forever, right? So whatever happened, she goes no further than Charlottesville, is what she says here, right? So they start on their trip here. So on the drive, Sammy, the older guy, is asking Joel what questions he would ask the president if he got a chance, right? And he says, I'm not going to softball him, Sammy. in retrospect, Mr. President, do you think it was wise to disband the FBI? Now you got to understand, guys. This is how the left portrays Trump, and if he was to disband the FBI, that would be a nightmare to them. But for other people, they would see it as a good thing, right? And he also says he's passive aggressive or something like that. And he says, "Sir, how is your policy evolving in the use of airstrikes against American citizens?" Right? So that's a part of the fiction. But they think that a president like Trump would do these things to Americans. Okay? Mr. President, do you regret any actions implemented during your third term in office? So a lot of people have been talking about Trump getting a third term for a very long time. So these guys aren't just making this up. They're actually drawing from sources on the internet and in chat rooms and, Twitter or whatever, the blogosphere. This is not just made up. And in fact, going back to this slide again, right now, 2025, they're talking about, Trump could get a third term if it's proven that the 2020 election was stolen. Okay? So keep all that in mind as we move on, right? I mean, I kind of jumped ahead of myself and I named Trump, so there we are, right? So, and so Joel here is like, now we're talking, yeah, whatever. So, just be sure you get the words out before the piano wire gets too tight, right? And take that for what you want. And so let's see here what I have in my notes. All right, so they say there's a gas station up ahead, and so that's where they find people are price gouging at the gasoline station. We also find that the same people in control of the gas station have hung up anyone that violates them by trying to loot. Looters are left to suffer until they die or someone executes them. Okay? So let's go to these. So he says, "Are you?" He basically says, "We're just looking for gas, right?" And he says, "Y'all look fuel per." No, sorry. He's basically asking if they can have a fuel permit, right? And he said, "No, we're actually just passing through." And she says, "Sir, if we pay," and he says, "I was never going to give it for free," this little sarcasm or whatever. And she says, "Over the odds." What's over the odds? 300, right? For half a tank and 2 cans, right? So obviously that's a price that's way overblown, right? He says 300 buys you a sandwich. And of course, this sort of thing can happen and does happen sometimes during hurricanes and, natural disasters and other things, right? So this is not too far-fetched, and I won't say too much about it, but, I would say they kind of make the country people look a little like this is what they'll do. I mean, not all country people are like this, but anyway. So he says, "We got a ham and cheese sandwich," and she says 300 Canadian, right? And he says, "Okay." And so now they get to the part where they're going to see the people hanging up that were thieves or were trying to loot. And so there we have it. And so again, I cut out a lot of the the things that were unnecessary for this breakdown. So it says, I told her I don't mind if she looks, speaking about Jesse. And she asks, who are they? And he says, looters. And I used to know that guy, right? We went to high school together. And Jesse's just looking in awe, in the sense of being terrified. But, so they take pictures and everything and they leave. So as the group continues their road trip, over the radio we hear from the president that peace talks aren't going anywhere. Then we hear the president declaring to stand by the Constitution and the rule of law. But make no mistake, the president and his entire administration are the bad guys in this movie, right? After driving for a while, they stop by a ruined helicopter, and Lee trains Jessie on how to take inspiring photos with her dad's camera. And so this is just a glimpse at that. By this helicopter. And so she's telling her what she's going to do is going to make a really good image. Right? There's no indication of how this helicopter was downed or anything except for the power wires. It probably hit some power lines or something like that. So she's telling her that it's her dad's camera. She just disclosed that to her. And would you photograph? Oh, Lee is asking her if she would photograph her the moment she gets shot. This is setting up something that will come about later, and so I won't give it to you right now. So she says, "What do you think?" You know, Lee says, "What do you think?" All right. So a couple scenes later, let's see where this is going. Oh, actually, it says, "What do you think?" right there. Okay. All right. So a couple scenes later, we get to see some of the gruesomeness of the war. In an undisclosed location, one member of the militia group gets shot to death while the photographers do their job. After the opposite forces are defeated, we also see the rest get executed with a .50 caliber gun on the back of a truck while Jesse takes photos. And here's those scenes, right? And this movie is shot very well, just for the sake of the technological, right? I'll give them credit on that. So they're like, come on, because they're trying to get around to the corner to the right there, and they're getting suppressed by people that are high above on the second floor of the building. And so this is just that guy got shot and is bleeding out. And here we go. They're about to infiltrate, and they went upstairs and took care of those guys, but some of them survived, so they're bringing them out now for execution. And you know, and by the way, you really don't know if these are good guys or bad guys. We're just getting something from their viewpoint, okay? And so they set them up out here, and without any, you know, it's just straight execution. Boom, boom, and there we go. And the guy in his face, he's loving this, you know. So later, Jesse mentions something about the Antifa massacre, but didn't make it clear if they were massacred or if they did the killing. And I think these next screenshots are gonna, let's see here. So they're saying what just happened was a rush, and they're driving through a little town here, and okay. So let me go back to the Antifa thing. So she wasn't clear if they did the massacre or not, and it basically seems suspicious to me that the writer of the movie wouldn't make that clear, because remember, the left thinks Antifa is a good thing. All right? Because their name is anti-fascist. And I'm not going to go through the whole history and, of Antifa, but most people know that they're not good. And Antifa is a far left hate group paid by people in the shadows through NGOs to cause chaos in blue states. If you didn't notice that, they're mostly active in blue states. So anyway, and they're now deemed a terrorist group. So anyway, so he's asking, did we just go through a time portal? And it says it's like a Twilight Zone, but I think we probably moved ahead too far. Let's see here. I'm gonna go through my notes here. Okay, all right. So let me just go through this really quick. All right, so she says it's like a Twilight Zone. They stop at this store here, and they go inside because this whole place seems quiet. And this might be further along in my notes, but it's here, so let me just continue this, right? And so this young lady here is in the store. She's the clerk, and he's like, "Are you guys aware? There's like," he's like, "out of interest, a pretty huge civil war going on all across America, right?" And she says, "Oh, sure, but we try to stay out, all right? So these people are not trying to get involved and just taking the middle road." And he's like, "Stay out, yeah, stay out." With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best, right? And she's just playing coy, really, because you're gonna find out in a second. They're not just a part of a Twilight Zone, and so Sam and Lee are outside, and he says, look at the tops of the buildings, but subtle." And we see two armed people up top. So they're guarding their town. Okay? So it's no joke. You come here to start trouble, you're gonna get trouble. All right? And Sam, by the way, has been in war before. So he said, "Wouldn't have suited us anyway, Lee. We'd have gotten bored." Basically, he's saying if he was up top there, we would have gotten bored. I think that's what he's saying anyway. All right, so what do you think he'll actually say? If I do get a microphone over him, not much. The one that gets taken, Gaddafi, Mussolini, I forgot how to pronounce it. Siasu. Anyway, you guys know what it says there. I forgot how to pronounce this word or this person's name. They're always lesser men than you think. Basically, when they get kidnapped, they break down and get soft. At the end, they let you down, Joe. And Joe's not this tough guy either. He's kind of a beta male. And so it says, just as long as he isn't dead before I get there. Now, this is setting up something for the rest of the movie as well. Okay? And so now, after Lee and her crew leave that town, right? So they stopped at a small town. There's no indication of war, unrest, because the town stayed out of the conflict. The journalists seem stunned that they haven't taken a side or got into the conflict at all. Although a few minutes later, we find out that they are armed men on the rooftops. There. That's where I missed my notes. Okay. So after Lee and her crew leave that town, moments later at the Winter Wonderland site across from a mansion, there's a body in the street, right? An unknown assailant is sniping at anyone who dares to travel on that road. So this is a glimpse here. And driving in. And he's like, hold up. And they see something ahead. I cut this gruesome part. I blurred it for you guys. All right. And so there's the body in the road. And they moving up to it. and everything looks semi. And then they say maybe we should turn around, take another route. And he says, "Can you see anything?" And she takes out her camera lens, which has super focal length, right? And she says, "No." So she should be able to see from the car what's going on in the house. So she says, "No." And it says nothing, no shapes, no movement, nothing. And so it says, "Okay, I'm going to drive forward, I think." And he starts, right? And then here comes a shot. So that he swerves off the road and parks next to that truck right there for cover. And heads out. And she's there trying to look inside the house. And there's still shots going off, by the way. And they take cover. That's the other young lady and Joel. And so then they see two snipers there on the ground, right? So the unknown assailant is sniping at anyone who dares to travel, right? So the crew sees two military snipers hiding in the grass beyond the building. They eventually take out the sniper, right? So they're saying this guy's a good shot. And he takes out the Santa Claus. And then the young ladies are between the cover. And Joel is pretty much annoying the snipers, asking who's in charge and who's giving you orders. And he's like, "No one's giving this order, man." And he's like saying, you're you're retarded. Okay? So one sniper says, "I have good news." And so they take out the sniper, and all is well. And so we don't get any more information about the location or who was shooting for that purpose. We don't know what was going on. What was his purpose? Were they defending something, or were they just crazy? We don't know. Nothing is explained. It's all vague, and the audience has to decide what is going on for themselves, right? So as they continue on their way, a car starts to descend on them, and this is where the movie starts to get a little bit better. So she's like, "Got a car coming up on us pretty fast here." And they look back, and they see the headlights there. And she says, "What do you think?" "I don't know. Maybe they're just in a hurry. And they're coming up, again, pretty fast. Or, they're in a hurry, all right, because they're going even faster. And he smoked his tires on the last corner." Well, we're not going to outrun anyone in this thing, because, it's a press vehicle. It doesn't go that fast, right? And he says, "Slow down a little, Lee. Let him pass." And so they show the footage here. And he says, "Don't look at them. They just roll on by." And you have Joel sleeping in the car. He doesn't know what's going on. And so they catch up to them. And it turns out that it's Joel's friend, Tony. He says, "How are you guys doing?" Right? "You just scared the what out of me, right?" "Good. That was the idea." And so, did you tell them where we were headed back to New York? And so, basically, they weren't supposed to be on the trip. That's what's going on. So, they spoke the night before when they were in the hotel lobby and drinking and all that stuff, right? So he says, "I don't know, Lee. He was pretty drunk. When he was hitting on the girl you got on the back seat." right? So Joel was hitting on her and whatever, right? So, look, I must have been wasted. And now, the guy in the car, and I have a name down here. What is his name? Let's see here. Benai, that's his name. So they're trying to ignore the vehicle, and when they see the other group of photojournalists, Tony and Benai, that's the two guys in the car there, were trying to prank them. It turns out that Joel let the news out that they were going to New York because he was drunk, right? So now, one of the passengers, Tony, in the vehicle crosses over into the van being driven by Joel's group, while both cars are driving side by side. Tony thinks his juvenile behavior is quite hilarious. Suddenly, Jesse decides it's a good idea to follow Tony's lead, right? And so she's like, "Are you crazy, Tony?" And he decides to tell her to keep the car steady. Don't worry, I've done this before. Keep the car steadily. And now this idiot says, I got to do it too, right? Jesse. And tension rises when Lee and Joel worry about it. So anyway, she crosses over. And the other guy says, my new passenger, much better, right? And she's like, pull over. And she says, bye-bye, Tony, bye-bye. See you in Washington. And so, that's right, they're going to Washington, not New York, because they were in New York a minute ago. Last night. So anyway, so they speed ahead, right? And so the driver of the other vehicle, Bohai, drives off with Jesse. Tension rises when Lee and Joel worry about where Jesse was taking Bohai. And so Tony assures them they are just having a little fun. Later, after being run off the road by an oncoming military vehicle, makes haste to catch up with Jesse. So Jesse's taken by Bohai, okay? And so she says, I told you, he drives like a maniac. He says that, Tony. And so they start driving frantically, in a sense, speeding up. Say, where did they go? And Sam says, this feels funny. Where did your guy go, Tony? He's just playing around, that's all. I don't want him around. She says I don't want him messing around. And I want Jesse back in the car. Or this might be actually Joel talking. And so he says, relax, Lee. He's just showing how fast he can drive. None of this conversation makes sense as far as he goes. But anyway, the girl is fine. How the blank do you know if she's fine? Jesse says. Can you see her? So there, and now the truck comes to. He's not purposely doing it. It's just they didn't see it, and it's in the middle of the road, and so they run off the road, and the truck doesn't really stop to help them out, and so now. What happens next is the first real highlight of the film. They find the car up ahead in front of a ranch, parked awkwardly with the driver's side door and the rear passenger door open, as if they were taken from the vehicle, as you can see here, right? So no one's speaking, and they're driving up to the car. Now they're starting to wonder what's really going on, because nothing was intended to happen to either of them, right? So now Lee slowly drives the press van up the driveway near the back of the house. And so now they're hidden from direct sight of anyone in the rear. Lee, with the help of the focal length of her camera, spots Jesse and Bohai, right? And basically they're being escorted and put to their knees by two armed gentlemen. And this is while a third-party person is dumping dead bodies from a truck in a large gravesite. Into a large gravesite, I should say. So, Lee, Tony, and Joel muster the courage to rescue their associates while Sammy is told to stay behind because he's too old and can't run. So she says, we need to go down there now. Sam is saying if we go down there, they're going to kill us. And Joel says no. I mean, there's a lot of presumption going on here as far as Joel is concerned. And so those aren't government forces. Those people did not want to be seen doing what they're doing. Tell us, Lee, basically what she says. She says they're talking. They're probably just giving them a scare. That's what Tony's saying. They killed all the people in that truck. Looking at him like, are you crazy? Right? They could have killed the whole town. But they will stop now? Who knows where those bodies came from? Are the bodies in uniform? No, they're not. And so she says, I'm going down. I'm coming with you, Joel says. And I think that's Tony saying me too. I'm telling you, every instinct in me says, this is death, okay? Death. That's Sam talking. And so you stay because you're old and you cannot run. Just doing the talking. I think that's Lee or Joel saying that, right? So here's a view from the grave site. They're on their knees, and we now get a view of the soldier in the red glasses. He applies lime on the bodies in the open grave. The three journalists approach, appealing to the men, explaining that it's all a misunderstanding. What's happening? Okay, now it's Joel. And this is the guy in the red glasses. Everybody saw this one from the trailer. Guess there's some kind of misunderstanding here. Yeah? The guy in the red glasses says. These two guys over here, they're my colleagues. And, so that's the other guy that was driving the truck. And so the guy in the red glasses, who's unnamed, is like looking at them like, really? You know? And so, what kind of colleagues, he says? Journalists, sir. We're passing through. He says, passing through to where? Charlottesville. Charlottesville? What's in Charlottesville? Good hiking? I mean, this guy's being, coy with a guy that is, throwing bodies into a gravesite as if they can't get in there too, get shot and put in there too, right? So anyway, so he says, good hiking, I hear. And he says, actually, we're covering the university campus there. Of course, he's lying. They started the new program. They're reopening the school, which is surreal, which is a surreal feel-good story. And I guess we all need that. And so he says, this guy's your colleague? This guy is your colleague? Yeah. This guy here. Yes, he's my... And he shoots Benoit in the chest. Right? That guy? And of course, Jesse's in shock. And this guy's like, okay. Right? Looking at him straight face. And so he says, sir. And now Tony is in complete shock and can't hold it together because that was his best friend or something. And he's like, Joel is like, and he's like, just what? Just what? And Joel's like, you know what? This, just please. And he's like, what? Sir, please. Please, sure. Yes, speak. Let us. We're American journalists, right? Just saying what? So he's being really aggressive, no nonsense, because the picture they're painting here, this can happen. But again, a militia is murdering people. That's the picture's being painted here. And they're acting like, guess what? Nazis. And he says, okay, what kind of American are you? Central American? Southern American? What? He says, Florida. Florida? Central? And Joel is kind of nutting up a little bit. And he says, what about you? Where are you from? Speaking of Jessie. And she's not answering. And Joel is like, tell him, Jessie. I think it's Joel talking, or Lee. And she says, Missouri. He says, Missouri. The show me state, right? He's looking shocked as ever and still weeping. And he says, the guy in the glasses says, what's your deal? Where are you from? China? And he doesn't get a chance to really answer at all. And he gets shot in the chest, just like his friend. And he says, China. And of course, everybody's in shock. And Joel says, no, what? You stop it, okay? Stop. You stop it, okay? Stop. And he holds the rifle towards Joel. And he says, no. All right, so let me see my notes here. Okay, so I said here in my notes that they immediately put Tony down with one shot from his Colt AR-15A3 tactical carbine to the heart. Joel panics and pleads for them to stop while the two soldiers turn their guns on him. Suddenly, as you're going to see here, Sammy, which we knew this was a setup already in the plot, Sammy rams the press vehicle into both armed men to save the day. And here goes the slow-mo of that. And like the guy's like, who do you think you are? Telling me to stop. And no one really knows what's about to happen. And then we see the press truck coming up here, press van. and he's surprised, and they get knocked out the way. And Jesse falls back and lands into the grave. All right. And so Sammy's like, get in the car. Get in the car. And Jesse here is laying on the dead bodies. All right. As you can see, it's not a pretty sight. Again, sorry for the gruesomeness. Joel helps her to finish climbing out of the grave. And so they escape, but Sammy takes a hit, and we'll see that in a second. He's like, go, 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 go. Get in the car. And the guy that was in the truck the whole time runs out to grab his rifle. Right? And he starts letting off shots at the truck, van, whatever it is. Right? But they do escape, and everybody's obviously still in shock. And there goes Joel, crying and whatnot. And so then Sam says, we got to stop. So before I go into the rest, in my eyes, the soldiers that were just disposed of were supposed to be some far-right militia indiscriminately taking power and cleansing the town of whoever they decided wasn't worthy of breathing the breath of life from the Almighty. So the director and writer tried to make the opposing sides at war ambiguous, right? And so, but when a person with keen observation discerns the deeper points, it's pretty easy to figure out who is who. The main war journalists are more likely left-leaning from my observation. I mean, you really have to watch the movie. Especially with the overtly suggestive questions he was dreaming Joel would ask the president earlier in the movie. A third term, abolishing the FBI, and the rest. Seems a bit on the nose, if you ask me, especially if you've been following politics since 2016. So here we go. We see that Sam is saying we got to stop. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he says, I can't drive. We can't stop. You got to keep blankety blank drive. And says, Joe, I can't. And we see that he's shot. Says he's been hit. He's bleeding. And he's like, no, 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 no. And so they get out, and they get him out, and they move him to the back. It's like, okay, come on. And so here we see that he's dead, and it's possible, I'm not sure, but it's possible he was either shot in the heart, or probably not the heart because he's driving a long time, so I would assume it's probably his lungs, right? Yeah, probably his left lung. So a shot to the heart is pretty much instant death. So that's got to be his lungs or something. Anyway, as we move forward to the third act of the movie, we're gonna see. Well, let's see here. Let's go to this is the encampment of the Western Forces military base in Charlottesville, and they're gonna make their way to D.C. And so we see the Joel over here screaming out his lungs because Sam is dead and his friends are dead. The other journalists that got shot. They still have Sam's body in the car. And there's a whole thing here. And I didn't bother going into all of it, but there's another crew of journalists that they meet at this encampment. And so next we're going to go to Washington, D.C., and basically Washington, D.C. Has turned into a war zone. If you guys played Modern Warfare 2, the original, it's sort of like that. Whoever played that game, you know what I'm speaking about. There are a couple other games that are similar, but Modern Warfare 2 really and they probably got inspiration from that game, honestly. But anyway, so it's turned into a war zone, and so we witnessed tanks, helicopters, and loads of military vehicles, especially at the Lincoln Memorial, right? As you can see here, near the entrance of the White House. As we get closer, right here is just all this stuff going on at the Lincoln Memorial. And then we get closer to the White House, and they're calling out that they're snipers. And this is the entrance of the White House here. So this Humvee is coming, and I believe they're shooting people in the tower there. So that's near the entrance of the White House is where we find the war correspondents and photographers accompanied by the Western forces, military taking out the opposite forces defending the White House, right? So they say we got two over and two on the tower, okay? So yeah, they're trying to take out the people defending the entrance to the White House. He says, I bet we can send a round right through that tower, right? And they start shooting from a tank, and they destroy the tower. And so Joel is escorting Lee to get down. And he says they'll fall again, push it back, and all this stuff going on. And so they start entering the entrance for the White House, right? But Joel and Lee and Jesse are still outside of the entrance, right? So what we witnessed next, I think right here where it says "kill on the forehead," I believe I'm not sure who they're talking about. I'm sorry. So they're saying keep it going, move it, let's go, and go. And so it says here, Western forces have reached the White House perimeter. That's the other journalist talking there. They got intel from the generals. They surrendered yesterday, right? The generals basically surrendered yesterday. And so it says the president's right in that blankety blank building, right? Basically the White House. I believe it's the White House anyway. So yeah, it's the White House. So it says the president is on the move, right? So let me see what I wrote here. So it says the Western forces take no prisoners and execute everyone who exits a vehicle with extreme prejudice, right? Because now what we're going to see is the president's motorcade tries to make an escape through the main entrance and is cut off through heavy gunfire and flanking from Humvees, as we're going to see in a second here. And so we see they're moving. And so they say the vehicle is coming through. Got as much of this as I could. And they crash into a Humvee. And they just started shooting at the window. She starts taking photos. The other vehicle there is getting shot up. And they say the beast, meaning the presidential vehicle. As you all know, it's called the Beast, or you should know it's called the Beast. And they're the Beast, after it's getting fired at, is flanked by a Humvee, and boom, it crashes, and she's there taking her photos, and the soldier here says, "I'm going to war." And anyone that exits that Humvee, they might as well have stayed inside. Okay, like I said, they kill with extreme prejudice, no question asked. Extreme prejudice, executed on the spot by the Western forces. No one shed a tear, no one asked questions, it's just done, right? So Lee starts looking back at the White House because obviously that was a decoy. And so his vehicle has been stopped, is what they're shouting here. And they're like, go, by Western forces as it attempted to escape. Okay, that's the journalist talking, that the president's vehicle has been stopped by the Western forces as it attempted to escape, right? And so the photojournalists are looking on, and they say, he's not in there. And they're walking towards it, and she says, he's not in there. And so they start looking around, and the soldiers, they're like, follow me, follow me. I think POTUS is moving out. But that's not POTUS. The guy says, don't shoot, don't shoot. And a woman comes out, and guess what? Both of them get executed on the spot. Right? And so now we're looking back at the White House. And let me see here. So I say in my notes, remember, the viewer of this movie has no understanding whatsoever why the Civil War is happening or why the military is so determined to execute everyone associated with the administration. I found it repulsive that unarmed personnel are executed. I mean, it was really repulsive to me. Usually you want to round people up if this is even an act that people need to go to a trial, a military tribunal or something. But no, everyone's executed. Everyone involved with the administration is executed. And you'll see more later. So while those scenes are going on and Jesse and Joel are moving closer to the commotion, taking photo, Lee says, like I said, the president's not in there. And so now, at the White House, a small unit of Western forces lead the way to the White House while clearly communicating to the photographers to stay out of their way as they go from corridor to corridor, eliminating whoever is left and resisting. And so let me show you a little bit of that before I move on here. So they enter the White House, and the personnel are just dead, executed. And they're moving through whatever room that is, they're moving through. And then they get to the newsroom, right? So they end up in a newsroom where one lady is trying to negotiate the president's surrender. They listen until they get fed up, and this is what happens, right? I'm here to negotiate the surrender of the president. You the WF, meaning Western forces. And she says, take a wild guess. Because remember, only murder is in their intent here. Okay? And she says, can the president be entrusted into your safe care? Right? She says, yes, ma'am. We'll take real good care of him. Just bring him out here. We're not bringing him anywhere until we have agreed terms. And he says, you need to guarantee a safe passage for the president. And we need extraction to a neutral territory. We request Greenland or Alaska. Nah, no terms. And the one talking is the female officer, or whatever you want to call her, soldier, to your right. Bring him out here. We gotta move, Sergeant. Ma'am, the president is willing. And they shoot her. Right? And so basically, I'm writing my notes here. There was no need for her to end her life. What kind of military justice are we dealing with? This seems like the actions of an invading force rather than a morally justified military that would apprehend, imprison, and seek justice for the traitors, then hold a military tribunal, as I was trying to say earlier, right? So there, they took her out. And so she calls on the rest of her troops to move with her. She's like, come on, get back. And so now we see a firefight in the building sections before reaching the president. This is where, let me get to it first. I don't want to spoil it before we get to it. So this is a fight in the corridor. And, of course, the photojournalists are doing what photojournalists do, try to get the best shots and all of that, right? And so he's like, I'm out, I'm reloading. And Jesse's just in the middle of all this, and Lee runs to block her and rescue her in a sense. But as she's doing that, she pushes her down and gets shot. And so remember the question earlier in the movie where it says, if I were to get shot, would you take the photo? And the answer was yes. Basically, the roles are reversed here. Okay? And Lee gets shot instead, and Jesse's the one that's like remembering what she said, and guess what she does? Starts taking a photo. As the life exits from her body. A lot of compassion, huh? And so, the irony is beyond the obvious. Neither Jesse nor Joel even bothered to check her pulse. She fell right beside her, right beside Jesse. Neither of them shed a tear nor showed any emotion when Sammy died. So for the audience watching, there's no emotional payoff. The last two journalists only cared about reaching the president and watching what happens next, especially the beta male, Joel. Right? So here goes the rest of the scene. She just gets up, and he picks her up, and they continue on their way. Not a tear shed. So, now, the last scene is the second highlight of the film for you guys that haven't watched the movie. And again, the movie's not great, but this means a lot right here. So what we see is they are pulling the president from his desk in the Oval Office, right? And we see the soldiers, 3 of them, drag the president from behind the Oval Office desk. He's on the floor, facing upwards, cowering. They aim their rifles at him, right? And Joel says, wait, not because he wanted mercy, but a last quote from the president, right? And the president's looking up. And by the way, I said it earlier, this is supposed to be Donald Trump. I hope you guys know that, right? And I know just because he has a blue jacket and a red tie on, it doesn't have to be, but all the indications are there. if you've been paying attention, right? And so Joel gets down there in front of the president and says, I need a quote, right? And the president says, don't let them kill me. Joel, with disdain in his eyes, says, yeah, that'll do. Then Jessie just looks, raises her camera, and watches as they execute the unnamed president. And there's no, as you see here, no one cares. They're just executing everyone, and they got to the top, the leader. And there is the end of the movie, right? So again, it's written and directed by Alex Garland. And this movie is perfunctory at best, but I decided that although it's a forgettable film, it was important enough to break down my interpretation of the artwork, right? Maybe I'm just jaded because we're well past the election of Donald J. Trump, second term, but I also remember a lot of rumblings about a civil war if the demons running our country took over, since the demons running our country took over in 2020, the election, and they weren't removed legally through the voting process. So, because what they did was illegal, that's what I'm getting at there. I've always said that America isn't ready for a civil war for various reasons, no matter your political leaning. All we can hope for is God's providence to prevail, as it always does. He put Joe Biden in office for a reason, but most of the country doesn't have a biblical worldview to discern the times we're living in. And so, moving on to the rest of the film here, this is just the credits and how they're pretty much taking pictures like the dead president is a trophy. And obviously, that's the name of the movie. And it's done by A24 that releases a lot of strange films. And that's it for this breakdown. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that you found value in what you've listened to tonight. This is very, I think an important movie to break down just because of the implications within. And people are still till today talking about, are we going to go to a civil war and all this stuff? Because remember, a lot of people in the background want that to happen. Evil, demon-possessed, Luciferian people with agendas that do not align, obviously, with God, do not align with the nuclear family and everything that we deem as normal and good. And so they want this country to be fractured, torn apart, especially with the influx of people that don't necessarily belong here. So this is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn, and this is also our segment called Hollywood Matrix. So I'll see you on the next one.